Welcome back, lovely artist. Today is our intro to chainmail. Chainmail is a very ancient form of armor making, and it's used today in a lot of contemporary ways, including deep sea divers, butchers, law enforcement, and of course, my favorite, jewelers. So today, I'm going to introduce you to the most basic chainmail weave, which is called the 4-in-1. And it's called the 4-in-1 because for every ring, there are 4 rings that go through it. So you can see it is 4 rings going through 1 ring. We are going to break it down into steps for you. And the first thing we need to learn how to do is how to open and close rings correctly. Then we're going to take those open and closed rings. We're going to put them together in sets of 5. And then I'm going to show you how to weave them into a flat chain. A flat chain. Yes, a flat chain. So this is the 4-in-1. This is what we will be making. In my classroom, this is the minimum requirement right here. You can see that this is a bracelet. It is about 6.5 inches long. And if you count the rings this way, you can see that they go in 3 rows. So we call this chain the 4-in-1, and it is 3 rings wide. Now, this is our foundation chain. Once you have done this, you can do all kinds of things. So this is the same exact chain. It has a slightly smaller ring in colors around the outside. So this one is 5 rings wide, made with 2 different sizes of rings. But wait, there's more, of course. And then there's this one. And this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rings wide. And then it has additionally these small rings attached to the outside rings. And each of those rings has an additional ring that has a little blue bead attached. I like this because it helps keep the edge of the bracelet flat. And the little beads give it a really nice sense of movement and flash. Of course, you can keep it very simple. This is actually a piece that I made for myself and I wear frequently, especially when I'm teaching. This one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rings wide. Now, you may have noticed 3, 5, 7. Yes, when we're making bracelets, we pretty much always do it with an odd number of rows. And that is so as we finish it, at the end, we can taper it down to a centered point, and that is a great place to attach your clasp. Once you've learned this basic weave, you can do all kinds of things with it. You can use it to make small flat pieces like this to make a keychain, or one of my favorites, same weave using colored rings. So the burgundy and the black are a slightly smaller size than the silver rings in the middle. They're all aluminum, and this is exactly the same weave. It's the 4-in-1. If you don't believe me, you can turn it this way and you can see there are your rows, 1, 2, 3 of silver, 1, 2, 3, 4 of each of the colors, and then a ring on each end to finish it. So it's very versatile. You can do a lot of things with the 4-in-1. Of course, everybody who sees it thinks immediately that they're going to make a shirt or a pair of gauntlets. Best of luck to you. So these are some of the things that you can make. Again, my minimum requirement in my classroom is this, but I will tell you that this does not feel as good to wear as a bracelet that is 5 rows wide, and it just doesn't lay as nicely either. So once you have this part, it's super simple to get going, okay? So we have a couple of things that we have to do first. In my classroom, I have all my students count out their rings. I like everyone to start with 60 rings. You only need 48 to 52 rings for a bracelet for your average person, but just in case you mess a ring up, okay? So you're going to start by counting out 60. And of course, if you have leftovers, you put them back or, add them in. And again, this is just to make that minimum one that is 3 rings wide, okay? So you're going to count out 60, and then you're going to start out by opening some rings and closing some rings. So I tell everyone to start by opening about 10 rings, and then you are going to close about 20 rings, okay? And that will give you 4 sets plus the rings for attaching those sets, okay? So I have some rings here. I have some that are already closed, and I have some that are already opened. Now, the rings that we're using today are 5/16 rings. They, so that's just a hair under 8 millimeters if you are doing the metric system. I like this size for beginners because it's small enough to look good as jewelry, but big enough to be able to work with easily. So let's talk about how to open and close rings, okay? To start with, you need to make sure you've got the right kind of pliers. There are so many different types of pliers, and there are a lot of people who don't have all the information on what kind of pliers you need. So a lot of people will tell you to get needle nose pliers. So these are needle nose pliers. Traditional needle nose pliers have teeth in them, and you don't want to use pliers with teeth, especially if you're using aluminum rings, which we are, because aluminum is a very soft metal. Your pliers are made out of steel, which is much harder, and it will actually impress that texture into your rings. Rule number 1 of jewelry, it needs to be comfortable. If your metal is all jagged and rough, it's not going to be comfortable. A lot of chainmail artists like to use this type of plier. This is a flat plier, and it has a square nose, and it's very comfortable to use for opening and closing rings, okay? Now, another set of pliers that you may encounter are these. These are called rosary pliers. People think that because these are used for making rings or loops and wire that this is correct. It is not. We use these only for making little loops in wire. So for example, when we are closing head pin wires like this to make little beaded charms for the ends of our jewelry, then we use rosary pliers. So what is the best plier? Well, the best one is the one that fits your hand and you're comfortable using, but this is what I like. These are bent nose pliers. They come from Harbor Freight. I like buying my pliers there because they are inexpensive and because I can get individual pairs of pliers instead of having to buy a whole set. So I like to work with a matched set of pliers. I like 2 bent nose pliers, and almost all the time my students will pick these up and they'll want to use them like this, tip to tip. That is not correct. That tip is really narrow. It doesn't give you a lot of control, and the edges of these are pretty sharp. So again, that'll scar your metal. So the way to use these is backwards, actually. I like to hold them like this, and then you want to hold your rings on this outside curve. This gives you this wider area inside to control your movement, as well as getting the tips of the pliers out of the way so you can actually see what you're doing. Okay, so let's open and close some rings. I have some rings here. I'm going to get my open and closed ones out of the way so they don't get mixed up. And let's take a look at these. These are about 16 gauge wire. These come from Chainmail Joe. I'll drop his link down below for you. I've been buying my rings from him, gosh, for at least 10 years. And the quality is amazing. So generally there's 2 kinds of rings you can get. They will either be saw cut or they will be pinch cut. You want saw cut rings. Pinch cut rings will not close flush, okay? And flush just means when the edges are actually meeting together perfectly, they're butting up. And that's what we want. So let's take a look at these. The first thing you want to do is you're going to open about 10 rings. So to open a ring, you're going to identify where the little slice is. You're going to hold it in that outside curve of your pliers. Grab it with the other pliers, and you're just going to twist. It's literally just a little bit of a rocking motion with one wrist. We don't want to take the ring out of its true round shape. So we're not pulling it apart like this. You're going to grab it and then just with your dominant hand, rock that one down just a little bit. You only need to open the pliers just enough to be able to get the rest of the rings onto them. So don't yoink it all the way open, okay? So here is one open. I'm going to do a couple of more for you. Remember that metal has a memory. So if you make a mistake and you over open it and you try and pull it back, just know that that metal is going to be somewhat work hardened now from moving. It has a memory of being forced open and it's going to want to stay that way. Okay, so you can see that my rings are not ripped apart. Okay, just like that, just enough to be able to slide another ring in there. So you're going to open up about 10 rings. Okay, as many as you need to practice, but I like to set up my workspace with open rings on one side and closed rings on the other because it makes my weaving process much faster. So now let's talk about closing the rings. Closing the rings is really important. You can see that there's just the tiniest little gap here, okay? You can just barely see right where it was cut with the saw. We want to close that gap, but we don't want to do it by pushing the ends of the ring back together. So the easiest way is to open it up just a little bit first, and then as you bring it back to close it, you're also going to put in a little pressure from the outside, okay? So open it a little bit, pull it back, just like that, okay? And the goal is to get those ends completely lined up and flush so that when you look at it from the top side, you no longer see those little arms being off from each other. Now there's a trick that I teach my students, and it is this. You're gonna open it a little bit, and then when you bring it back, you wanna listen for this little snick sound, okay? You want to be able to both feel and hear the metal making contact. That lets you know that you've got a nice solid close, okay? Let's see if we can pick it up. Just like that, okay? You want to try and reduce that space between the ends of the rings. Now, because these are aluminum, because we're not making armor, some of them, if they have a little bit of a gap, that's okay. But you have to be really careful when you are doing chainmail, because if you don't close your rings tightly, if you don't get them as flush as you possibly can, the chainmail pixies will come and they will find a way to line up all of those gaps, and then your chain will disassemble itself. So it's very important. We want that gap as minimal as possible. You might be able to slide the edge of a piece of printer paper through it, but you shouldn't be able to get anything fatter than that through, okay? And then I always like to look at my rings after I close them, look at them from the top and make sure that the ends are lined up. So I don't know if you can see on this one, but they're not. And you might think, oh, you're just being a perfectionist. Well, yeah. And no sense trying to do something if you're not going to attempt to do it to the best of your ability. So you're going to open about 10 rings and you're going to close about 20 rings. You're going to listen for that little snick. and you're going to check them from the top to make sure that they are actually closed. Now, a lot of times you'll get a ring out of a bag and you'll think, oh, that's close enough, right? That looks closed. It's good. It's not. Trust me. Okay. Open it up a little bit, bring it back to close, listen for the snick. All right. I'm going to open and close some rings. Then we're going to put them together in sets of 5. All right. I'll see you for the next part.